Hi friends, when confronted with this cataract, the first thought that crossed my mind was that it looked like a sheet of ice astride the pupil and I needed to break it. Let's look at the particulars of the case. This was a small pupil with calcific anterior capsule. There was advanced pseudoexfoliation and sphincter sclerosis, a white, hard Mogagninian cataract, and of course doubtful zonal integrity because of the pseudoexfoliation. So let's see how I handled this case. The first step was to adequately stain the anterior capsule, although it's doubtful whether the entire capsule had been stained adequately because of the small pupil. The first step, because of sphincter sclerosis, is to effect a very small and controlled stretch of the pupil to break this sphincter sclerosis. This will make it easier to pop in the Gupta ring later on. So this is what I'm doing with the help of two Y pushers. This has created about 2 to 3 breaks in the sphincter sclerosis or sphincter tears. The pupil dilating device will give you a fixed size of pupil that will make it easier for you to conduct and complete the case without worrying too much about pupil shutting down on you during the procedure. Therefore, it removes one problem from the equation, which is the progressive narrowing of the pupil. Each of the 4 scrolls are then engaged onto the pupillary margin with the help of a Sinskey hook. If you see carefully, each scroll has got 2 shoulders, the superior and inferior shoulder. You need to bring the inferior shoulder of the scroll to the pupillary edge and then let it go, and it will automatically engage with the help of a Sinskey hook. You need to center the square configuration of this ring. As you can see, the stain has not done its job very well and it still looks pretty white and there's no red glow as well. Therefore, while performing the capsulorhexis with the Sinskey hook, for most part of the procedure I was going more by feel rather than sight. I do not know if I had completed the capsulorhexis correctly in this particular case, which added another dimension to the difficulty. The cortical cleavage hydrodissection is not strictly necessary, but I used the fluid jet to uncap this thin sheet of ice-like cortex that covers the hard underlying nucleus. So let's observe the phacoemulsification, which will be totally unedited from this point onwards. Then you bury the phaco tip with the help of sufficient amount of power, which is 40% in the multiburst mode and a vacuum of 350 millimeters of mercury. After getting a great and nice hole, create the crack and then carry the crack to the base plate and effect the separation. Try to uncap the thick cortex that lies over this nucleus, because this will give you a much better visibility of the crack and the separation. It's important to carry the crack through and through so that the nucleus breaks through its posterior plate. If the fragments are connected together at the posterior plate, then it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to isolate and mobilize these pieces and bring it into the center. Try to emulsify small bits of the nucleus. Do not try to bite off more than you can chew by handling a large piece. Although I initially cracked it into 4 fragments, I am further downsizing each of these fragments to much smaller handleable size, after which I am going to isolate it and bring it to the center. By downsizing the fragments into smaller pieces, you can greatly limit the amount of free-floating shrapnel in the anterior chamber, which means there will be less endothelial damage and much clearer postoperative corneas. Another important tip to note is that because you've exposed the phaco tip to almost 2 millimeters, make sure that the irrigating port of the sleeve does not get wedged into the incision site, because this will cause the chamber to collapse, especially when you're emulsifying the last piece. This could cause a posterior capsular rent. Make sure there are no small fragments left behind in the eye, after which the emulsification portion of the surgery is over. I realized at this point that the capsulorhexis was not perfect and there's a small tag of capsule that's been left behind. Either this happened because of incomplete capsulorhexis, or this happened because of the chopping, that I chopped the edge of the rhexis. I don't know what, but the solution to this problem is to hold it with the Utrata forceps and round off the capsulorhexis. Because the patient had pseudoexfoliation, I took a considered decision to implant a capsule tension ring, which will give an equatorial stretch to the capsular bag and increase and enhance the stability of the capsular bag. The technique I most prefer is the hand-on-hand technique rather than the self-loading injectors or any other way. This is a technique that gives a lot of control, and if you can actually hold the eyelet with the Sinskey hook, you can dial this capsule tension ring so that its maximum convexity lies in the area of zonular dialysis. Of course, in this case there was no zonular dialysis, but just done as a precautionary measure. The trailing haptic did not go in smoothly into the capsular bag and it needed a little bit of maneuvering. At this point, I was really glad that I had put in a capsule tension ring which could take in all the stresses of maneuvering the lens into the bag. All that remains now is to very carefully remove the Gupta ring, which was a real lifesaver in this case because it removed one dimension of the difficulty that we could have faced in the form of a small collapsing pupil. Once the loops are disengaged, the Gupta ring is then pulled out of the eye with the help of an intraocular forceps. The viscoelastic is then washed out and the case is successfully completed. And this is just to remind you how it looked before I started and how it looked at the end of the successful phacoemulsification. Thank you for your attention.